this lecture, we're mainly focusing on anything that supplements a brand identity. So we'll be going over iconography, copywriting, illustration, and photography, and then going over the homework. And each one of us will cover a specific topic. So, when you make a brand, besides the physical assets that you might have, often in a brand system, there's other assets that you might use to complement your brand identity. So I'll be going over iconography, and this is a little bit different from illustrations, but we'll explain the difference in a bit. So icons are symbols that convey their meaning through their resemblance to real-world objects. So often icons, have a specific meaning, and they have an intentionality behind them. So they're often used to present something without needing to use words, especially if it's a really complicated topic. They add meaning to existing labels, so they're paired with words. They also inform a user to do a specific action, for example, an arrow to direct the user to a certain location. And it's really commonly used for UI designs, also business cards, menu items, and to represent products. So just on the Google homepage, you can see that there are icons next to each word, with images as the image icon, news as a news icon, and so on and so forth. And on home screens, you can be a bit playful with the icons I use. Here, their icons are doubled as illustrations. So tomatoes represented by tomato, carrots represented by carrot. And then in menu items, people use icons. There's also this double as illustrations, but it helps convey the meaning and the look of the item. They also use the stickers. So these are icons of different types of furniture that they also might use in their own website design. And that is standardized across all their designs, the entire design system. And another example of icons and more icons. This is used in posters. So the often, 4 different types of icons there are only line filled. So that means it has line and they're colored glyph. So they're one colored, and they use negative space a lot of time, and flat icons. So they're used multiple colors, but they're flat and can or may not contain icons. Lines. So just some principles when you use icons, you have to make sure that when you look at an icon, you understand immediately what it means. So heart means like, the middle one's warning, music, and then up. For example, some people might, want to be creative and use icons that, are a bit unique. However, so if you look at this, as you go across from left to right, the meaning of the icon kind of gets more confusing as you go on. So, you have the right arrow, warning, seatbelt, and then I don't know what this one means. I don't know what this one means. I don't know what the rest of these mean. But yeah, you have to make sure that when you use an icon, it actually makes sense. And it helps to use existing icons out there just so that you're standardizing your usage throughout. You're using real-world examples so that people who just are introduced to your design know what you're talking about. Readability, so icons should be legible at different sizes. Icons are generally used at a very small size, so your icons should be not as detailed, not so detailed that you can't see it clearly. So for example, on the right, a station, you can see there's 20 windows on this one panel, but you can barely see it if you make it really small. So for example, this calendar, there's technically 20 to 30 days, 31 days in calendar, but they simplify that with 6 squares, but you still get that's a calendar. So just make sure that you're making sure that the icon is readable. So also this applies to line weights. So for example, at a really small size, the top icon, the line width of the white space is very, very narrow. So make sure to increase it as you make it go bigger. I think this is more pertinent to like when you use like Illustrator. Like sometimes when you scale an image, the line width stays the same. So make sure that your line width is in ratio to the when you increase the image. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, it should scale when you make the image big, the vector bigger. Another example is a very good example of how they're very readable is on Google Maps. Even at such a small like size, there's a very clear difference between a car and a train versus walking and hailing for a ride. Alignment. So sometimes when you auto align things, they're not actually like to the eye, they're not actually aligned in the middle. So make sure that each icon feels balanced and pleasing. So for example, on the right, the play icon, while this is technically aligned to the middle because one side is like thicker than the other side, it feels kind of off. So make sure to align and use your best judgment to make it even. Brevity. So I guess this is similar to readability, but in a sense that, or I guess readability is the outcome of brevity. So try to express things in the most simplest manner possible. Those two things, you can still see their ship, but one conveys them much more simply than the other. But don't like simplify things to a point where it doesn't make sense anymore. Um, you can do a bit more playfully. For example, like pizza, like yeah, here's just examples of different icons to use. And yeah, also, I guess this is more about the style of icons. Some people can also use gradients. So these are, Procreate, My Firefox, Netflix, they all use gradients in icons. And yeah, but they still keep it very simple. Consistency, so across the different icons you use, try to make sure that try to make sure that they fit with your brand and maintain a similar style. So on the right, you can see that they'll use like a node type of illustration and single line. You can see this is, I think, the feather icon set. So all of them use very, very simple lines and it's like all kind of rounded. Compared to this, so this icon set uses like sharp notches in their design. And also in going on with consistency, you can also add personality to your brand, to your icons by aligning it with your brand. So this set of icons uses colors, both filled and line based illustration styles. Another example is, this icon set, this is a GIF. So they all use a very big blue filled accent, but the rest of them are using black lines. There's another icon set, uses gradients, but within the same color scheme. And make sure that the icons that you use are holistic. So they're intended for the audience that you're using it for. So for example, if let's say you're primarily creating assets for East Asian demographic, you use colors that are associated with that language and culture. Red, if they read from right to left instead of left to right, think about that. Or for example, they use a lot of Chinese people use WeChat. So when you think about when you think about common like social media icons, make sure to include those two. Lastly, I think it has to be sizable. So it helps to use a grid when you try to make it when you create icons if you want to do so. And they often have to be pixel perfect, meaning everything is a width of 1 pixel, or they fit within a pixel. They're not like half a line or like 0 point a weird number. So yeah, for example, like this icon, it can be all separated into in a 1 by 1 grid increment. Yeah, this is only if you're really using it for like UI. You don't have to necessarily follow this for like this brand for this project, but this is just good to know. Yeah, and some resources for for existing icons that are out there, material.io if you're doing UI icons, feather icons as I mentioned before, the very thin minimalistic icons you see. You can search icons on like using plugins like Figma plugins or different community files, and yeah. So yeah, that's it for my section. I'll pass off to Katrina.
Thank you. I can share my screen. Cool. Cool. So we'll go over copywriting next, which is actually a really important part of branding. I feel like a lot of people don't really think about it just because it's like words and writing, and like normally you associate brand identity with how it looks and the visual side to it. But when you're building a brand, I think your tone of voice is especially important, and that kind of shows itself in the copywriting. So basically, if you don't know, copywriting is basically just like the writing on like packaging or like anything like on the web, any medium you use that requires words, that's called copy. Um, but yeah, your goal for this brand is to establish a voice that really fits your values, your personality, everything you stand for, and just make sure it shows up in like how you say things, how you explain things. We'll go over a few different kind of vibes and like styles of copywriting. Here, I just screenshotted some examples from Recess's website. They're like I believe, CBD drink, and they're very chill, basically. And you can see that through their like lowercase type here. Just like everything's kind of just very chill, weekend feeling, very casual, very laid back. You can see here, it gives you that very like relaxed vibe. They're clever, they're funny, they're cool. Versus this is OK Drugs. They are a marijuana company, I think direct to consumer. They're all caps, they're loud, they're in your face. They're also pretty clever, and they're straightforward. Versus Nike, very like motivational, very strong language, very like the latest and greatest, you can't stop us. Like just very motivated, and yeah. This is Bueno. This is an agency, a design agency, and they're really cheeky. I really like how if you go through their website and go through their case studies, they're just very clever, and they like know who they are, and they're not afraid to just be really cheeky about it, which is something that is very charming. Step one when copywriting is just know your audience. So if you're catering to, let's say, the Gen Z millennial demographic, talk to them the way they talk to each other, basically. Um, yeah, I think one really weird but good example of this would be Amazon Prime Video's Instagram. If you just like look at the captions and like what they post, I just feel like they have that tone of voice locked down for some reason. And it's like very weird. But yeah, know your audience. If you're catering to like older people, older than millennials, like more mature, then you don't want to be super cheeky or clever or like out there or inappropriate. Just going back to Recess, you can see calm, cool, collected. That kind of entirely personifies their values and their vibe, and you can see this in this writing. This is Wayno. This is through their website. They kind of inject their voice across anything, even the frequently asked questions or like the about us page. So like whatever you're doing, whether it be the founder story or just something as like boring as the FAQ, just try to make sure that your brand's tone and personality really shines through. Even in like the questions page or like the form, it's like, hello, we've been expecting you. So like, don't be afraid to stand out from the crowd. Here, this is Recess's about page, solving a problem. And yeah, just the way they explain everything, it's like it's how you wish 2 p.m. coffee would make you feel. So just be smart about how you want to present yourself. This is OK Drugs about page. They're pretty straightforward about who they are and what they like in life. and like what they do. So yeah, just really try to know what you're about and what you're trying to achieve and what you offer to your customers. This is Wayno's website again. They're kind of explaining their values and their beliefs and also just showing how they implement those values and beliefs. So it's pretty transparent. It's fun. Like they explain what's important to them. They explain how they achieve what's important to them with like yearly retreats. Yeah, another really important tip is to include a call to action. I think this is more relevant in terms of like digital assets, like websites or social media assets. But a CTA is basically like a little call to action button. So, like shop, but you can definitely make it more personable than like just shop. Like you can say like um take me there or something like that. And just like depending on your brand tone, voice, you can do like really clever things. Or like got a project, let's talk, tell us everything. Yeah, here it's pretty standard, like shop, join us. Another tip, don't overwhelm your consumers with too much information. Just kind of stress the fact that, you're chill, you're not gonna annoy them with like you're not gonna spam them with a bunch of emails. Um, I like this one, get emails only when we write something worth reading. Or this one, like we send it every 2 weeks, you will like it really. And then your fancy email, which I thought was really cute. Yeah, so Glossier, this is just a very straightforward description and then a call to action. So just keep it short, keep it sweet, and keep it on brand. Also, another tip would be slightly alter your tone, voice, whatever, if needed, according to your platform. So I guess the way you would be describing yourself in like a Forbes article, if Forbes reached out to you and asked you to explain your brand versus on your social media might be slightly different just because Forbes has a slightly different audience. And my last tip would be to proofread everything. Make sure you don't have typos, make sure everything's spelled correctly, make sure your grammar's good, and make sure it makes sense. So just have people read through it and just be like, hey, is this like weird? Is this voice too unique? Just make sure it makes sense. And if you're trying to go for like a certain vibe, like really cheeky or clever, just get advice from the people around you and ask like how it reads to them. And I will let
Yep,
Brian
I'll
take
take yep,
over.
it's me. I'll take over. All right. Is it sharing? It's good. All right. So now we talk about illustrations. So similar to copywriting, it's how you is a way to express your brand. So visualize your brand. And then it's most of the info is based on this article. If you want more in depth, you can go read it. Then we're gonna dive into some examples, and then we'll go over principles. So this is Slack. Um, illustration, you can see some like good points about it is like it showcases people. Slack is a sort of virtual workspace organizing text platform. I don't really know how to explain it. I'm sure people have used Slack before. It has a minimal-ish color palette. It has like fun, loose people. They're all happy and they're collaborating. Just illustrates the brand. And I think I think one thing that I uh, respect is instead of like the classic flat illustration has like blobs of texture. That's really nice. Then next, this is Dropbox rebranding. They've I think this is their rebranding from 2017. They've experimented a lot with the different graphics, and this is the one they settle on. So you can see there's this very loose, playful charcoal or like pencil line drawing of these little blobs and things, and then like rich texture, which is minimal. And then here it's used on a web page as the focal point. I think it showcase it. reflects sort of maybe the audience of Dropbox or the wide variety of people that use Dropbox, and creativity and collaboration as well. Similar to the last one. And then this is Uber's rebranding. I don't know if this is current, but it's very techy, I guess. In terms of Uber, very flat illustration, clean lines, smooth curves. I guess this is a very classic like flat human style, I want to say. Yeah, it's very clean, very tech, which is slightly reminiscent or slightly reflects Uber's like a online rideshare service. So yeah. And then this is a point to not underestimate our colors. So all these illustrations are made with flat colors, and they really, really emphasize certain moods. From like icebreaker here, I assume this is somewhere in like Ibiza or like Greece, maybe like a beach. You have very vivid pop colors that let it pop. And no line work, but yeah, these are really example how far you can take Illustrator, I think. Then this is also another successful brand according to the article we're basing this on Shopify. Has similar the sort of flat illustration style that's very popular nowadays. But it also has like certain flares, like these little flares. Very curvy lines. It's fun. People talking. And then there's some other examples I've thrown in. This is maybe some people can tell. Like when I saw this, I could tell immediately what it was from. It's from Duolingo. It's a very interesting stylized illustration style of their people. I just thought it was interesting because it's very recognizable. And then this is actually one of my all-time favorite brand illustrations for MailChimp. And basically, it's just very, very loose, maybe ink wash almost illustrations. And they accompany posters here. They're very loose and wacky and shows sort of the breadth of MailChimp. I think it's very artsy, the direction they took. And then this one's also just very cute on their landing page with giraffes and a doggo. Yeah, and then so important thing similar to copywriting is know your brand. What do you want to convey with your illustrations? What are you trying to communicate to your audience? Are you fun? Are you artsy? Are you serious? Are you techy, etc.? And what type of illustrations do you need? Like as we've seen in the examples, they can go on a number of things. They can go on landing page. They can go on posters. They can, I think these are just free floating assets. They can go on anything. They can also go on icons, as Jago mentioned, can just be full frame illustrations. Yeah, and then where will they be used? On your website, apps, posters, print, packaging, and I think about the breadth of medium that these could appear on. Then the very important thing I think is to create cohesive or unity in your illustrations, similar to the rest of your brand. You really want them to read as a cohesive whole. And some examples to do that, not that you have to follow this at all, have a limited color palette, or slight variations of a main color palette that you've chosen, using rectangle boxes, sticking with one illustration style, or using, like we've seen, flat illustration, we've seen like very textural line illustration, and we've seen flat illustration. There's a lot of ways you can do with it, but they are all the same way, basically. Yeah, and then another tip is to think of a world for your illustration, sort of like almost like world building for a show. Think of it like a world building for a show or book. Like where are these illustrations taking place? What types of people are in these illustrations? And why it's are these people and why are these places? And they should reinforce your brand identity every way. Yeah. That's it for illustration, and next Ella will go into photography.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. Can you see that all right? Okay.
Yep.
So photography. And so photography is about branding, establish a clear and specific photographic identity, showcase personality through photography. And a good tip is show and not tell. Photography is a great medium for that. And definitely something we're thinking about if you're pursuing a brand in, say, the food industry or fitness or something like that. Those are definitely kind of photography intensive brand types. So this is a game. So feel free to put in the chat what brand you think that these photographs are from. And then in the next slide, we'll reveal them. I'll give you guys a second. Okay, cool. Yeah, so National Geographic, again, very intensive or photograph intensive brand. Obviously anything to do with nature or any brand that kind of has an emphasis on like natural products will probably rely heavily on photography. And so National Geographic, sorry, let me get this out of my way, is kind of known for the vast, stunning imagery of nature. And also they've got this really high kind of contrast. So you can see in this top left, they've got the red against the green. And those are like very contrasting colors. And then here at the bottom, they have the, you know, the silhouetted nature scenes. So, you know, bring in those principles and when you're thinking about photography. Also in terms of photography, there's a great decal by NOD. Specifically for photography, and I've taken it. So if anybody's really curious about taking photographs for their brand, please reach out. Maybe we can schedule office hours. All right, next one. I mean, the brand's kind of, I just noticed the brand's like hidden in here. So go ahead and guess this. It's kind of obvious now. All right. So yes, it's Nike. We can also tell that by like going off back to Jago's presentations on icons. We've got the icon in the right corner here. But again, it's kind of like really stunning imagery and there's a lot of movement. So that's another kind of principle of photography to think about, how you want things to be moving within your frame. I think that's a great thing to think about, especially if you want to do food photography or include some sort of yeah, definitely food or I don't know, maybe bath products, things like that. I think definitely are enhanced with movement. So if you decide to take photographs for a restaurant brand or something like that, I definitely recommend considering how you can move food and it within your photos. All right, so Nike's known to be like cinematic, larger than life, speed, strength, and grit. And yeah, that's just to kind of emphasize this, the physical nature of their brand. And then here's just some examples, or here's another example. I think it's lesser known because I forget what it is now. But if anybody knows, guess in the chat. Okay. So this is Everlane. So they're more minimalistic, understated, and then they use a lot of like bright light, though their colors aren't necessarily super bright. And it's hip and calm and unassumingly refined. So yeah, again, like if you have a brand that's more minimalistic, think about how you can use negative space within your photographs, how you can use white space, things like that. And then here's this one. So try to guess this. I think this one's a bit trickier. Oh, okay. Apparently it isn't for Kyle. So this is Airbnb. So they're kind of warm, open, and they use a lot of photography of people in beautiful places. I think it does make sense, you know, this brand it definitely touches upon like values of like home and family and also different kind of styles of buildings. So that kind of gets that travel aspect in there. And it's very vibrant and colorful. So advantages of using photography and branding is it can make your brand more dynamic. and really easy to understand. I think you can give the impression of your brand very quickly through photography. And it can also send a variety of messages that sometimes you can't always achieve with just icons or illustrations. And it's emotional yet timeless, and it impacts audience with real world stories and feelings. That's definitely something to think about, what your story is and kind of what imagery you need to depict that. And then industries that rely heavily on photography and branding is like lifestyle, fashion, and media, informational products, ebooks, subscriptions, and services. But I would probably add like restaurants and definitely fitness wear. And then how to select and curate photography for your brand. So a great starting point would be to create a mood board and a style guide, and think about what story you want to tell and kind of write that out beforehand. I think that's really helpful. And compile a ton of photos and then start to edit down from there and really be selective towards the end and what really represents your brand and what represents the colors and adds to the kind of cohesiveness of your color palettes, your choice of contrast and your type. So here's an example of a mood board. Yeah, definitely be aggressive in curation. Only keep photos that work with each other. If they're not cohesive, your brand's not going to be cohesive. So definitely try to be as cohesive as possible in every step. But again, like, who knows, like sometimes it's good to be really open-minded in the beginning and edit down, but keep that editing really extensive. All right, so create a style guide with photography. So look for patterns in mood boards and collect them into a style guide. And this helps with staying focused and consistent within your brand. And then think about what kinds of content should be in there. Is it going to be products? Is it going to be lifestyle, nature, portraits? And then what kind of story should your imagery tell? These are all really good questions just to keep in mind. And then, yeah, again, think about what type of mood you want to convey and what colors are going to do that and what type of contrast is going to do that. Like, is your brand dramatic or is it softer? And, you know, like most brands will want to be fairly approachable. So using kind of softer, lighter color palettes. But again, Nike does not do that. They really thrive on being bold. So definitely consider how to best style your brand. And then ask yourself, does this photo make me feel something when I look at it? I think these two are great examples. I think kind of these summer shots definitely make you feel like you're on vacation. They make you feel calm. And then they also make you feel kind of excited, like you have a fun day or trip ahead of you. And so here's some principles to keep in mind when choosing your photos. Lighting, contrast, colors, composition, distractions. You want to think about if the elements are too busy or if the busyness is helping your brand. Definitely kind of keep that editing out mindset. And then authenticity. Does it feel like forced or is this genuine? I guess ask yourself, like, is this stock photo material or is this something unique that's going to uplift my brand? And then as for like the earlier elements, go back and these apply to all artistic concepts. Composition, definitely think like, again, about clutter, think about your background, negative space. And then I think colors and moods and contrast, that should just go off of the kind of color palette that you've already established. And then I think lighting is very important too, especially, yeah, it really adds to the tone of your brand and can make it like extremely dramatic. So be careful with that. And then be consistent. So whatever brand guidelines we have so far, definitely apply those. So I think that like this example has like a lot of white backgrounds and that works really well. And they also photograph like, for like it's mostly product photography. But as you kind of get to the top, it moves to shoes and it just kind of confuses the brand a little bit. So definitely try to be as consistent as possible. So photography should be storytelling, quick and direct communication, and can be a very powerful tool. And here are some more examples. This brand is called Unbirthday, and I think they do a good job with like kind of how they layer their social media. And so they've got like a pattern of like pink, and then they've got an image of like spaces, and then pink again with like kind of like pastries. And so their colors are very consistent here, and also they have these kind of deadpan shots for the most part. So definitely think about what angle the photograph is. That's another thing that adds to the composition. And then I found this baker recently. And so his photos are just really consistent. And I think something like if you want to take your own photographs, I think this is kind of a good example because they're all fairly easy to take. You just need really good lighting or, you know, like a good window space. But everything's really kind of from the same angle. So if you don't feel super comfortable with photography, but you want to try something out, this might be a good kind of reference. And then this is Lush. I think that they've done a really good job at being consistent and thinking about texture in their brand. I think there are a lot of kind of natural textures going on here. So that worked really well on adding to the consistency. And then this is kind of a transition point in their social media. So it seems like it's going from pink at the bottom and more artificial colors into these really natural ones as we get into like April and Earth Day and spring and things like that. So, you know, definitely this also ends up getting into like social media and how you decide to arrange these photographs will also determine how consistent your brand looks. All right, homework. So you're finalizing business cards and your poster design. And so finalize your business cards based on the feedback you got in critique today. Feel free to reach out to us if you are concerned about the direction of your designs right now. And then finalize your posters. Make 1 to 3, preferably 8.5 by 11 in size. But again, be creative. Feel free to, you know, kind of test things out. And then mock one of them up, or both cards and poster, and submit them to the folder. And that'll be in Notion. And then final deliverable of business cards should be JPEG, PNG, or PDF file. And poster designs as well. And at least one of them must be in mock-up form. And then be sure to include at least one of the things from this lecture in your poster/business card. So whether that's illustrations, icons, tone of voice, definitely bring this kind of, go back and look at these slides and think about how to incorporate that. All right. Cool.